Alrighty, CNT120, we're working on our Chap3Lab. We just got done looking at MAC addresses. Now we're going to look at IP version 4, and we're going to set a static IP4. When we're done, we'll put it back to dynamic. So I'm going to do the Windows side, and I'll do the Linux. So I'm just going to minimize my virtual machine. I'm not going to close it. I'm just going to minimize it so we have less to look at. So my Windows machine, I'm going to go to the network connections, like network and sharing, etc. I'm actually going to use down here, I'm going to right click on top of the network icon, open network and internet settings. Once I'm here, I'm going to use the network and sharing option down here, network and sharing. Now, again, take note, Ethernet 3, that's the one we'll be working on. Ethernet 3, that's the one we'll be working on. So I'm going to open up network and sharing. In here, here's my Ethernet 3. And this is my network connection. It's showing that I have access and I'm passing information back and forth. We are going to go to the properties and we are going to go look at the IP version 4. Now, if you remember before, we looked at, file and printer sharing, client for Microsoft Networks, file and printer sharing, and then IP4. We are now going to alter this IP4 setting so we can put in the address we want. So I can either double click that or highlight that and click properties. Right now it's set for dynamic. Get an IP address automatically from a DHCP server on the network. So we are going to click the option for use the following, and we are going to put in our own static IP address. Now, when we do this, we have to slow down, be careful, and make sure we don't make typos. One number off and it might not accept it, or one number off and our communication we're trying to do later won't work. So I'm going to go very carefully. Now, we're going to use this scheme, 172.16.10. And for the last octet, the last number, we're going to use our PC number. So below your monitor on the CPU, there's a sticker that says, Haltech 101 or Haltech 103, either one, whatever lab room you're in. And then right below it'll say CNT and a number. That is the number we're going to use in the last octet here. So I'm sitting in computer number 25. So I'm going to use 172.16.10.25. Now, make sure you're using your PC number. We don't want to have two of these in the lab room the same or they conflict. It's like having two houses labeled 101 Main Street. Not going to work. So you need to make sure you're using your PC number here. I'm then going to use the subnet mask. This one right here, we're using a Class C subnet mask, 255.255.255.0. And I'm not using a router. I'm not trying to get out of this room. So I'm going to leave that blank. Okay, we're doing very local traffic at this point. And we'll say OK. And we'll say close. Now, make sure you are not using the X up here. If you do, you're basically saying ignore all the changes I just did. So make sure you're closing the windows with the OK and the close and so forth. It'll actually apply those setting changes for us. Okay, I'm closing all of that out. You'll notice that we have no internet connection. That's correct. We are local in the room now. That's what I said before about downloading your lab file. All right, I'm going to close all of this just to make my screen cleaner. I'm going to open the command prompt and I'm going to look at the IP config. So here's my command prompt, IP config, and I'm going to look for the Ethernet 3 again. Scroll up, here's my Ethernet 3. There's the address I just plugged in. Okay, and you notice the default gateway is blank. Yeah, we're not trying to get this traffic to leave the lab room. We're keeping it local. So this guy is set and ready to roll, and I can even verify its connectivity by doing a ping of the loopback. Oops, I think it's showing off the bottom of the screen. Let me make, there we go, right there. So we're going to do a ping of 127.0.0.1. That's the loopback. So it's saying, yes, your NIC is functioning and your TCP/IP is working and functioning, so it's giving me a response. The next test, we're going to actually ping the Linux machine once we set it. So I'm going to pause right there. I'm going to minimize this, and now I'm going to backtrack real quickly, and I'm going to open my virtual machine and do its settings. So I'm going to bring this back up. Here we go. We left it off here. I will make sure I'm saving this file. I'm going to minimize that. I'm going to close my terminal prompt for now. Down here in the bottom, we're going to click on the network icon here. So I'm going to left click on it. Network settings. Here is my network settings. Here's the IP, hardware address, default route, all that kind of good stuff. Right now, the network connection is turned on. We are actually going to turn that off. We're going to go make the changes and then we'll turn it back on. When I turn it back on, it'll apply that change. So we're going to use the little gear button here. We're going to pick the option for IP4. Right now it's set for automatic, so we're going to hit the drop down and say we want to do manual. We want to plug the address in. And now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to plug in the 172.16. I might need to use the numlock key, 172.16.10. Now, if I turn right around and use my same computer number 25, it's going to conflict with the Windows machine. So on the Linux side, we're going to use 100 in our computer number. So I will make this, again, I'm setting at computer number 25, so I'll make it 125. If you're sitting at computer 4, you would make it 104. Okay. Net mask, we're going to fill in 255, 255, 2550. And again, I'm going to leave everything else blank, and I'm going to say apply. It has not applied yet because I need to turn the network card back on. When I turn it on, it's going to start using that change that I just made right there. Now, if you have this conflicting somebody else in the room, this NIC might start turning on and off on you because it's conflicting. So if I start having it turn on and off like that, I need to stop and verify, what change did I make, what might not be correct in there. So now that I have this made, I'm going to close this just to clean up my screen. I'm going to go open my terminal, and I'm going to use the ifconfig command. And there is the change I just made. There's the IP address that I just changed on this PC. Whoop, whoop. And I will do a ping on this one of loopback as well, 127.0.0.1. Now you'll notice something different on this guy. It's going to keep pinging until we stop it. Windows just did 4 for us. Linux and Apple continually ping until we stop it. The stop command is Control-C. So I'm going to use Control-C, and that'll break that pinging that's going on. That'll stop that session that's running, if you will. All right, now that I have my Linux machine working with its IP, I'm going to slide over here. And now that I have my Windows machine with its IP working, I'm going to slide it over here. I'm going to try to make both of these appear together. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ping between them. So on my Windows machine, I'm going to issue a ping to my Linux, which, if I scroll up here, this was its IP. So I'm going to ping 172.16.10.125, and I should get a successful. Whoop, whoop. There we go. From this guy, we're going to ping 172.16.10.25, and I should get a successful. I'm going to use a Control-C to stop it so it doesn't keep going. So these two have usable IP addresses. They're on the same network. They're able to communicate with each other. Whoop, whoop. Yay. Okay, so our settings and everything are working correctly. Now I'm going to gather those results before I set them back to dynamic. So over here on the Windows side, I'm going to highlight this right here. I'll do a Control-C or Enter, one of the two. I will open up the Windows text file, and that's why I put a note there that's my Windows text file. And we're going to say this is layer 3 IPv4 static address. And I'm going to paste that in. I'm going to make sure that's the ping. I will save that file save. Okay, I'm going to slide that over and kind of minimize that, get that out of the way. Back on my Linux virtual machine, I'm going to capture this result, this ping here. Right-click copy, if you will. I'm going to open up this text file on my Linux machine, and I'll put a note here of layer 3. And I'll say static IPv4 address, something like that, and I will paste that in, and there's that ping. And I will save that file, Control-Save or File Save. All right, so I now have gathered or saved the static IP address on both. Boop, boop. Now, let's set these both back to dynamic and make sure they get back on the network, if you will. All right, so I'm going to minimize my virtual machine. Back here on Windows, I'm going to go back to my network settings, network and internet settings. Look for Network and Sharing Center. Look for Ethernet 3. Go to Properties. Go to IP4. And all I need to do is say Obtain IP and Obtain DNS. And again, make sure I close with OK. Close. Close. Okay. That way it makes that change for us. When I get back here, you should see that the internet connection has been restored. Excellent. And I'm going to go here to my Windows command prompt, ipconfig. and I'm looking under Ethernet 3 again, Ethernet 3, there is my dynamic IP address from the college. Yes. Okay. Now, I don't need to save these results. I just needed to restore it back to the connection so we can proceed with the next step, if you will. All right. So I don't need to save those. I just need to make sure I get it back there. So I'm going to minimize that. Let me go to our Linux virtual machine. I'll slide this over. Okay. I'm going to minimize my text file. I'm going to go down here to my network settings, left click, network settings. I'm going to shut the network card off. Use a little gear icon, go to IP4. Now, what I tend to do is delete these lines, highlight and delete, and then do automatic. That makes sure I get rid of all of that old data, if you will. I'll click apply. I'll turn the NIC back on, and it should be picking up a 192 from the college, and it does. And we see we have a connection here. We're not seeing any errors, which is good. I can close that, and if I go here to ifconfig, I should see that I'm getting a 192 address back. Whoop, whoop. Okay, so there is, we set the static IP, we did some pinging, and then we set both of these back to dynamic so they're back onto, the college network with an internet connection. So there is our IP4 addressing. We will come back in the next podcast and start looking at IP6.